There's a very interesting case reported there today in the media, and it's a High Court decision, and it's to do with an employee relying on their right to silence to refuse to answer questions in the workplace. And the High Court has found that the employee is entitled to exercise his right to silence in this particular case. However, that right will only last as long as the criminal process to which he's subjected is going on. Once that's completed, then he will be obliged. The background to the case, it involves an ESB employee. He has been accused apparently, or at least the company wants to put questions to him about alleged payments solicited from builders. So the allegation apparently is that he was asking builders for money for connections, ESB connections and so on. The judge ruled that the entitlement will cease when the criminal investigation into Kieran Sharkey ends, or when the ESB can establish or re-establish that its interests in insisting on the performance by Mr. Sharkey of the contractual obligations outweigh the risk of infringement of his constitutionally protected right to silence. So he has a protected right to silence. It's in the Constitution. He also has obligations under the contract of employment. However, the weighting at the moment, the balance at the moment, according to the High Court judge, is that he is entitled to rely on his constitutional right to silence. The ESB had gone to the High Court seeking a declaration from the High Court that Mr. Sharkey had breached the contract of employment by failing to answer questions put to him by the company about the allegations. The ruling relates to the allegation made last year, a number of allegations that several ESB workers sought unlawful payments from developers and builders in return for favourable treatment when carrying out works including connecting projects to the national grid. The allegations came to light in separate proceedings brought by ESB where it seeks orders requiring two building companies to share information about several ESB employees who, the building companies alleged, sought cash payments to complete electrical works near construction sites. The court heard that Mr. Sharkey had been referred to the ESB as being one of the individuals allegedly involved in seeking payments from customers. Last year, the ESB asked Mr. Sharkey to answer questions, including if he had accepted any payments from any party for preferential treatment. He was also asked that if he did seek payments, who did he get the money from, what amounts were involved, and what works were provided in exchange for the payments. The ESB claimed that Mr. Sharkey, whose home was searched by Gardaí as part of the investigation into the allegations, refused to answer any of the questions. He said that after obtaining legal advice, and because the matter was subject to a Garda investigation, he was invoking his right to silence to prevent any prospect of self-incrimination. He said he had done nothing wrong. The ESB claimed that the refusal to answer the questions meant Mr. Sharkey breached his contract of employment and therefore his employment was at an end. The ESB claimed the right to silence, as claimed by Mr. Sharkey, does not exist in the context of a private law dispute between the ESB and its employee. That right only relates to situations where a person is being asked to answer questions put to them by an entity of the state, such as An Garda Síochána, it claimed. Mr. Sharkey is an electrician with the ESB. He's from Finglas in Dublin. He has denied any wrongdoing. The ESB was not entitled, according to his legal counsel, to any declaration from the court that would allow it to summarily fire their client for not answering the questions put to him. That was the argument from Michael O'Higgins, senior counsel. Mr. Sharkey has a good record of employment with the ESB. He's worked with them since 2017. The judge in his ruling said it would not be appropriate for the court to simply state that the ESB could never discipline Mr. Sharkey for failure to answer the questions put to him. Mr. Justice Mulcahy said the defendant accepts that once he is no longer subject to the criminal investigation, he must answer the questions or face the consequences of his refusal to do so. Mr. Sharkey also accepts that the right to silence is not absolute, the judge said, and like all constitutional rights, no or very few or no constitutional rights are absolute. They all have certain limitations attached to them. While the criminal investigation is ongoing, the ESB must commence a process of assessing the competing interests involved, which, if necessary, can be reviewed by the court, he said. He said the ESB failed to take account of Mr. Sharkey's privilege against self-incrimination by demanding answers to its questions. It would be premature to penalise the defendant for failing to answer them, he said. The judge also noted that Mr. Sharkey has remained in his employment without being suspended. The judge said the parties agreed it would be possible to obtain information from Gorry that the criminal investigation into the defendant had closed. It was at least questionable whether the defendant's reliance on his constitutional rights could continue to be available to him indefinitely if the criminal investigation were not closed, the judge added. The matter will return before the court later this month. That's an interesting case. I think it's the first time I've seen anybody in a workplace scenario, in a contract for employment situation, employment law dispute, or employment law issue. It's the first time I've seen anybody exercising a right to silence and against self-incrimination and so on. And the High Court has found that he's entitled to do that at the moment. But when the criminal investigation is closed, at that stage then, it appears to be the case that he will have to answer questions for his employer, the ESB. Hope you find this video useful. If you do, I'd appreciate if you gave it the thumbs up down below. And you may be interested in listening to my podcast, the Irish Law and Small Business Podcast, which you can access on Spotify, iTunes, or anywhere else where you might get or listen to podcasts. Thanks a lot.